Welcome back. Today we're doing a deep dive into some source material you shared, focusing on a really interesting new supportive housing project up in Presque Isle.
Hmm.
It's not just about, building apartments. It seems like there's more going on.
Definitely.
So our mission today is to unpack the source, figure out what the key takeaways are, why this kind of housing is so important, and, well, what makes this Presque Isle project special.
Okay.
When you first went through this material, what sort of jumped out at you?
Well, what struck me right away was how the article defines supportive housing.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it really clear it's not just shelter.
Right.
The source argues pretty strongly that the supportive part is, the key. It's about wrapping services around the housing.
Okay.
So it shifts the focus. It's not just a roof. It's building a foundation for, long-term stability,
Mm-hmm.
getting people back on their feet properly.
Makes sense.
And that really connects to the idea of integrated services, which the source keeps coming back to as being absolutely vital.
Okay, that's a useful distinction. And the article really digs into the why, doesn't it? Explaining why this is needed, particularly somewhere like Presque Isle.
He does.
It talks about tackling housing and insecurity, obviously, but also the complex challenges some people face.
Precisely. The source sort of lays out that just giving someone keys isn't always enough to break those cycles of, instability.
Right.
You need to address the other things going on at the same time. Health issues, finding work, safety.
Right. So providing the tools to actually stay housed and move forward.
Exactly. That's the core idea presented.
And the article gets specific about who benefits most. It lists people experiencing chronic homelessness,
Mm-hmm.
individuals with disabilities, and actually that connects to some of the other material you shared about the specific expertise needed, like in special needs housing.
Yes, that's a crucial area.
You mentioned Flowers and Associates property rentals who specialize in that.
Right. Understanding those specific needs is vital. And resources like that book, The Joy of Helping Others, creating passive income streams through special needs housing, they really dive into that.
Good point. The source also mentions families facing eviction, people recovering from substance abuse, victims of domestic violence. It's quite a range.
It is. And the source kind of highlights that these challenges often overlap. Someone might be facing disability and homelessness.
I see.
So supportive housing aims for that coordinated response. It's focused on long-term well-being, not just putting out fires.
Okay, so we've established the why. Let's get into the how for this Presque Isle project. The article mentions some key features that apparently set it apart. What stood out to you there?
I think the biggest thing the source emphasizes is the integrated support services, how they're built right in.
Not just a phone number to call somewhere else.
Exactly. They're right there.
Oh.
They're very closely connected. Part of the whole setup.
And the list in the article is pretty comprehensive. Counseling, mental health support, job training, employment help,
Substance abuse treatment programs, too.
childcare services, educational resources, tutoring. Wow, that really covers a lot of ground, addresses potential barriers head on.
It certainly seems designed that way.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing highlighted is creating a safe and inclusive environment.
Okay.
The source mentions security, of course, but also the physical design itself, how it's meant to encourage people to interact, build a community feel.
So feeling secure, but also connected, not isolated.
Precisely. And location, right?
Yeah.
The source definitely stresses the importance of accessible locations.
Always key. It mentions being near public transport.
Healthcare facilities, grocery stores.
Educational institutions, too. Makes sense.
Yeah, because the goal isn't just, self-sufficiency inside the building. The source explains these locations help people integrate into the wider Presque Isle community.
Right. Getting to jobs, appointments, school, just living life.
Exactly. Facilitating that connection.
So moving from the features, the article also talks about the impact, the actual results, not just for tenants, but for the community. What does the source say there?
Well, for tenants, the big one is an improved quality of life. Pretty dramatically improved, according to the examples.
How so?
Just having stable housing plus that support leads to better health, both mental and physical.
Yeah.
Less stress, a basic sense of security that, maybe they haven't had in years.
That's huge. And the article also suggests it helps with community cohesion.
Yeah. The idea is that by helping previously marginalized folks find stability, it brings more diversity and interaction into the community fabric.
Okay. And any economic benefits mentioned?
Yes, a couple of things. Helping tenants get job training and find work means they can become more self-sufficient.
Reducing reliance on public assistance down the line.
Potentially, yes. And then there's the direct economic activity construction jobs,
Yeah.
ongoing operational jobs. It stimulates the local economy.
So the positive effects really seem to ripple outwards based on the source.
That's the picture it paints.
And to really drive it home, the article includes some personal stories, testimonials from tenants. I found those quite powerful.
They really are. They put a human face on it all. The source shares the story of Jane Doe. She talks about her experience with homelessness
Yeah.
and how finding this place with the support wasn't just shelter. It gave her back a sense of belonging, of worth, things she thought were gone.
Oh.
It's moving stuff.
And then there's John Smith, the single parent. He talks about the relief, just having stable housing for his kids and himself, and how getting access to job training through the project gave him a real path forward for his family.
And those stories, they just perfectly illustrate the so what, don't they?
Yeah.
These integrated services aren't just bullet points, they're actual lifelines. They enable real change.
Looking ahead then, the source seems to position this Presque Isle project as a kind of model. Like this is how it can be done effectively.
Yes, it sets a precedent for tackling housing instability, but it also calls for, sustained effort.
Right. It's not a one-off fix. It mentions collaboration being key: government, nonprofits, the community itself.
Everyone pulling together to keep the momentum going and maybe expand these kinds of initiatives.
And the source actually gives some concrete ideas for how people can get involved if they're inspired by this.
It does. Practical steps.
Like donating to local housing nonprofits, volunteering time or skills.
Or advocating, pushing for more supportive housing projects in their own communities.
And it ties this back to building a stronger, more equitable community overall. It really underscores that this kind of work takes effort and sometimes specific know-how.
Exactly. Like understanding those nuances in specialized areas we touched on, such as special needs housing.
Where expertise from places like Flowers and Associates or practical knowledge like in The Joy of Helping Others book becomes really important.
Precisely. It's not just policy. It's about effective, knowledgeable execution on the ground.
So let's wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've seen from the source material the critical need for supportive housing like this in places like Presque Isle. We've looked at the integrated features, the services that make this project apparently so effective.
And the real tangible impact it's having on people's lives and the community.
Absolutely. And the materials you shared also helped contextualize this, pointing to the broader field, including specialized areas like special needs housing.
Yeah, where organizations like Flowers and Associates Property Rentals operate, and resources like that book, The Joy of Helping Others, can offer guidance. For those interested, the book's on Amazon, or you can get contact info. Maybe we can link that. It's 901-621-3544.
Good note. The success described in the source really makes a strong case for this kind of investment.
It really does.
And that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. What does the success of this integrated approach in Presque Isle really tell us about what community support can achieve? Not just as a safety net, but as something that can genuinely transform lives and perhaps the fabric of our towns and cities, something to think about.